HOA Karen rented my mountain cabin and secret charged $150 a night for years without me. Have you ever felt the chilling betrayal of discovering your most cherished sanctuary, a place of solitude and peace, has been secretly exploited, monetized, and defiled by someone else's audacious greed? I'm Liam O'Connell, and my mountain cabin, nestled deep in the rugged embrace of the Sierra Nevada foothills, was more than just a getaway. It was my refuge. Built by my grandfather, it was a place where I reconnected with nature, pursued my passion for astrophotography, and, crucially, hosted small, private retreats for veterans suffering from PTSD, offering them a quiet space for healing and reflection, free of charge. The cabin was remote, accessible only by a winding, unpaved road that crossed a small, private bridge. Then, Miss Cassandra Vance arrived. Cassandra, the newly elected, self-anointed queen of the sprawling, pristine Summit Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, saw my rustic cabin not as a place of healing, but as an unacceptable rural intrusion. She was all sharp angles and sharper pronouncements, a woman whose perfectly coiffed blonde hair and designer hiking gear screamed unapproachable perfection. Her first official act, it seemed, was to send me a curt, imperious letter demanding I cease and desist from operating my unauthorized commercial enterprise, my veteran retreats, and upgrade my cabin to align with Summit Ridge's luxury aesthetic. Her ultimate, thinly veiled demand was for me to sell my dilapidated shack so that Summit Ridge could maintain its exclusive ambience. Her tone was dripping with condescension, her words a thinly veiled threat against everything I held dear. She looked at my cabin, a beacon of quiet service, as if it were a festering wound on the pristine landscape she envisioned. I tried to reason with her, calmly explaining that my retreats were nonprofit, entirely charitable, and provided a vital service to veterans. I even offered to provide testimonials from grateful participants and letters of endorsement from veteran organizations. Cassandra merely waved a dismissive hand, her perfectly manicured nails glinting. "Mr. O'Connell," she purred, her voice a brittle whisper of disdain, "your charitable endeavors are simply not suited for the elevated standards of Summit Ridge. We are building a community of distinction, and frankly, your rustic accommodations detract from our property values. The bylaws are clear: no commercial activity without HOA approval." Her words, delivered with an air of unassailable authority, left no room for debate. She was not interested in charity. She was interested in control and exclusivity. The true nightmare began on a scorching summer afternoon. I drove up to my cabin for a scheduled veteran retreat, my truck laden with supplies, only to find the gate to my private road, just beyond the Summit Ridge boundary, locked with a heavy, unfamiliar padlock. A sign, emblazoned with the Summit Ridge HOA logo, declared, "Private Road Summit Ridge Estates Residents Only." My heart pounded with a mix of fury and disbelief. They had locked me out of my own property, effectively preventing me from hosting the retreat. My veteran guests, due to arrive any moment, were now stranded, a stark symbol of Cassandra's petty tyranny. As I stared at the locked gate, a glint of something familiar caught my eye on the ground near the lock. It was a small, ornate key, one I recognized from a set I'd seen on Cassandra's keyring during a previous, contentious meeting. My blood ran cold. I quickly photographed the scene and then, driven by a gnawing suspicion, I hiked the long, arduous path around the locked gate, through the dense, unforgiving wilderness, to reach my cabin. What I found there made my stomach clench with a mixture of horror and outrage. My cabin, usually pristine and quiet, was in disarray. There were unfamiliar luxury towels, high-end coffee pods, and a stack of glossy brochures for Summit Serenity Retreats, a supposed exclusive mountain escape. My astrophotography equipment was haphazardly shoved into a corner, and the small, personal effects I kept for the veterans were nowhere to be seen. A quick search of the cabin's guest book, which I always left out, revealed a shocking truth. For the past 2 years, my cabin had been consistently booked, almost every weekend, at a rate of $150 a night. The entries were all in the same elegant, flowing handwriting, Cassandra Vance. She had been secretly renting out my cabin, using my private property as her own personal, lucrative side business, all while I was away, and all under the guise of the HOA's no commercial activity rule. And then, a chilling detail. Tucked beneath a stack of brochures, I found a printout of an online booking calendar. Not only was my cabin being rented out, but the calendar also showed bookings for the small, communal nature preserve adjacent to my property, a preserve that was supposed to be protected and open to all residents. The bookings were for exclusive stargazing tours and private meditation sessions, all at exorbitant rates, all facilitated by Cassandra. This wasn't just about my cabin. It was a calculated, high-stakes conspiracy, threatening not only my property, but a vital public resource and the very integrity of the HOA. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, the photos, the key, the guest book, the booking calendar, and the testimonials from my confused veteran guests who were now arriving at the locked gate, I resolved to confront Cassandra publicly. I learned she had called an emergency HOA meeting, ostensibly to address the ongoing issue with Mr. O'Connell's non-compliant property and to propose new, stricter regulations for community access. I arrived, my evidence ready, just as Cassandra, radiating an almost unbearable smugness, began her presentation, complete with glossy photos of my dilapidated cabin. I waited for a lull, then stood up, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Cassandra," I stated, holding up the guest book, "I believe this document sheds a rather inconvenient light on your community regulations." Her eyes, which had been sparkling with self-satisfaction, immediately narrowed. She quickly recovered, her voice sharp. "Mr. O'Connell, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is a private HOA matter. You are disrupting our proceedings." She attempted to rally the other HOA members, painting me as a disgruntled, eccentric recluse, a nuisance to their refined community. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, this is precisely the kind of element we are trying to remove from our beautiful Summit Ridge. But just as she was about to call for me to be removed, a quiet, unassuming man named Mr. Henderson, a retired forensic accountant who lived in Summit Ridge and had always been suspicious of Cassandra's sudden wealth, rose from his seat. "Actually, Ms. Vance," Mr. Henderson interjected, his voice calm but authoritative, "Mr. O'Connell raises a very serious point. And I also have something to add." He then projected a series of bank statements onto the screen. Clear, undeniable records showing large, consistent deposits into Cassandra's personal account from various online booking platforms, totaling tens of thousands of dollars, all labeled Summit Serenity Retreats. "These funds," Mr. Henderson continued, his voice gaining strength, "appear to be derived from unauthorized commercial activity, specifically the rental of Mr. O'Connell's cabin and the exploitation of community property." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Before Cassandra could even stammer a denial, the doors to the community hall swung open. Two stern-faced individuals from the county sheriff's department, accompanied by a representative from the district attorney's office, walked in. They had been tipped off by Mr. Henderson, who had contacted them after seeing the suspicious activity on the booking calendar. "Cassandra Vance," the district attorney's representative announced, his voice devoid of emotion, "you are under investigation for multiple counts of grand larceny, fraud, and trespass. We have evidence of unauthorized commercial activity on private and community property and the illegal collection of income. We also have reports of your attempts to obstruct access to Mr. O'Connell's property." Cassandra's face, which had been a mask of carefully constructed composure, crumbled into a terrified, pale mess. Her jaw went slack, her eyes darting wildly around the room, searching for an escape that wasn't there. She stammered, then erupted into a desperate, high-pitched shriek, blaming misunderstandings, overzealous booking agents, and a misunderstanding of the bylaws. It was the pathetic wail of a tyrant whose kingdom had suddenly collapsed. Then, a surprising voice emerged from the crowd. Mrs. Chun, a long-standing, quiet member of the HOA board and a respected local historian, stood up, her face etched with regret. "And Ms. Vance," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "perhaps you'd also like to explain why you pushed so hard for the no commercial activity rule, not for the community's benefit, but because you were secretly planning to launch your own exclusive rental business, using other vacant properties in Summit Ridge, and you saw Mr. O'Connell's cabin as a direct competitor that needed to be eliminated?" The revelation hung in the air, a final, poisoned arrow. Cassandra had been exploiting the HOA not for the community's benefit, but for her own illicit financial gain and to eliminate competition. The fallout was swift and brutal. Cassandra was immediately stripped of her HOA presidency, her reign ending in public humiliation and a perp walk captured by local news. The sheriff's department launched a full-scale investigation, leading to severe fines and criminal charges for grand larceny, fraud, and trespass. The HOA members, horrified by her deception and the legal exposure she had brought upon them, voted unanimously to sue her personally for misuse of funds and damages to the community's reputation. Her carefully cultivated social circle, once so eager to bask in her reflected glory, publicly disavowed her, fearing association with a pariah. Her secret rental business collapsed, leaving Cassandra utterly isolated and financially ruined. She lost her position, her reputation, her social standing, and faced a future of crushing debt and legal battles. Her karma was a public, humiliating spectacle, a direct consequence of her petty tyranny and audacious fraud. I felt a profound sense of vindication, a quiet triumph that justice, however painfully achieved, had prevailed. The lock was removed from my gate, and my veteran retreats resumed, now with even more support from the community, who had seen through Cassandra's veneer and rallied behind me. My cabin remained my sanctuary, a place of peace and healing, now even more cherished. In a world where bureaucratic power can become a weapon and individual ego can lead to audacious exploitation, where do we draw the line between community oversight and outright theft? When faced with such blatant disregard for property and personal integrity, what would you have done?